Tonight's meal, tilapia surprise with boiled cabbage. Begin cooking steps 1 through 50 now.
Are you kidding me? Making dinner shouldn't feel like doing a 1,000-piece puzzle. With Blue Apron's new one-pan assemble and bake meals, the hard part's already done. Pre-chopped ingredients, zero stress. Just assemble, bake, and enjoy. No complicated steps, no mountain of dishes. Try Assemble and Bake today. Get 20% off your first 2 orders with code APRON20. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
Ed, how you doing? United won today. They won a football match today.
They did, although in the second half they did their very best not to win. It was a game of two halves.
I literally can't believe you've started with a negative spin in a game we scored like 3 goals. Zlatan's back, Pogba scored a worldie. You're like, no, the second half was not good enough for my liking.
No, I mean, United were very good in the first half. I guess we have to temper that with... Swansea are definitely the weakest opponent United have played this season, I'd say. And they had, pre-season levels of intensity during that first half. I don't know what Bob Bradley's done in his 4 games as Swansea manager, but he's sucked all belief out of them already, hasn't he?
It's funny, we talked about they were kind of unlucky not to get a result against Liverpool a few weeks ago, which I think was Bob Bradley. They... were kind of unlucky not to get a result against Arsenal. They got a creditable draw against, I think, Watford. And then they got absolutely tonked by Stoke away. And that set them up nicely to get absolutely tonked by us.
Yeah, and for 45 minutes, United were very good. Passed the ball really quickly. It was an odd system, wasn't it? I mean, I think you, me and producer Tom sent a few messages to each other. None of us were that confident, having seen the team sheet, with a very, very odd back four and like 17 central midfielders in the team. And for quite a while, even though United were well on top, I couldn't tell who was in central midfield and who was at number 10. And I guess Mata and Rooney were supposed to be wide, but they both basically played at 10. And Pogba, who's supposed to be at 10, played at 10, and Fellaini kept bombing forward too. So it worked somehow.
I described it, United's formation today, as older gentlemen doing what took their fancy. That seemed to be the general gist of our play.
Well, it's also how 3-year-olds play. Give them a ball and they'll all chase it.
But it worked beautifully because some of those 3-year-olds are absolutely brilliant at football, and they showed it. So when the lineup came out, there was the usual smattering of people going, oh, why don't you wait and see what happens on the pitch before you complain about the lineup? And I kind of understand that. But on the other hand, I don't know how you can react to seeing that team. I mean, you could just choose not to react at all. But if you do see that team sheet, you're going to go, what? You got Ashley Young playing at right back, a position even Louis van Gaal rarely played him in. He occasionally played him there, to be fair. But Darmian at left back, Jones coming back into the side. That's kind of brings the shivers. You got Rooney, Fellaini, Mata, and Ibrahimovic all in the same team. So you're thinking slow. I saw somebody including Pogba in the reasons Man United would be slow, and I thought that was a bit odd because he's not slow. But yeah, so it was a kind of slightly terrifying starting 11, I thought. But the one thing that I thought was, well, if Pogba and Ibrahimovic play well, we've got a chance. And they did.
They did, yeah. Ibra finally got on the score sheet. He'd scored once in the previous 11 games prior to today, so very nice to see him back. And before he scored, he was already looking brighter, I thought. I mean, he plucked one out of the air, swiveled and smashed a 50-yard ball with his left foot at one stage, which was...
Yeah, beautiful.
Beautiful. Contrast that with the first major touch or contribution Fellaini had, where he just managed to run the ball out of play. Not quite as embarrassing as that one when he was playing for David Moyes and he ran the ball for like 40 yards out of play. But, not far off. Ibra good, Pogba very good. He's so much better with the ball in front of him, I think. And he seemed to pick up the right spaces so he could get the ball in front of him and not not play sort of with the ball behind him all the time and having to turn, as he sometimes does when he's at number 10. So, he managed to do it, although for much of the first 20 minutes, I was going, Rooney and Mata in exactly the same zone all the time and getting on top of each other. And they were closing off Pogba's space.
As has been widely pointed out, I think a huge part of the reason why Pogba was able to have the ball in front of him a lot was the presence of Michael Carrick. Once again, United's midfield, he's played 4 times this season, I think, and I think those are probably our 4 best midfield performances apart from the first half against Leicester. He was just brilliant today, wasn't he?
He was great, yeah, and made a very good case of being included in United's team against Arsenal. Although I guess that's the kind of game in which Mourinho is kind of worried about Carrick, kind of worried that his legs won't hold. But give him the ball, and he's absolutely fantastic. And his reading of the game and his understanding of movement means that it never, or rarely feels like he's too slow for the game. Now, this was Swansea, and this was a Swansea team that didn't bother to press at all for the first 45 minutes, and not much for the second 45 minutes. And so you've got to kind of take that into account. But he was great and magnificent today.
And he acts as a force multiplier for Pogba, right? In the same way that Herrera and Mata act as a force multiplier for each other. Having Carrick on the pitch is just gets you, +3 to Paul Pogba. If this was a Magic the Gathering style battling card game. That's way too nerdy a reference for you, Ed, but trust me, there's people out there that will get it. So it's great to have Carrick in the team for what it does for Pogba against teams like Swansea. And I guess we have to, not have to, but willingly talk about how reasonably effective Wayne Rooney was. 2 assists.
Well, yeah, certainly on the numbers, he's reasonably effective. But let's not lie. You, me and Tom were messaging each other going, bloody hell, what's going on with Rooney? So 2 assists and a part of the first goal too.
Yeah, big part. Really smart ball.
Yeah, big part. So yeah, effective, but he definitely doesn't play like a proper 10.
Well, he was the nominal left winger in this game. So
yeah, and he just kept drifting into the centre all the time. It's very good that Swansea didn't want to attack down the right, because United would have been in some trouble, I think. But yeah, 2 assists, can't complain about that, and he wasn't so bad. Although of course, Mourinho himself pointed out that. Give Rooney space and he'll hit all those Hollywood balls. Or I think he said, if I had the same space, I'd hit a 50-yard pass. So,
but I did think, although he did plenty wrong, I did think there was a notable uptick in his general all-round level of ability to control the ball and pick out a pass and make a good decision. And I wonder if the goal at the end against Fenerbahce helped him in that regard, or if it was just the kind of the game's kind of happening at his pace in a way, because he's surrounded by fellow incredibly talented geriatrics.
I think there's some of that. He's definitely better when the game is of less intensity. And he's got more time on the ball. Definitely. He just looks better. There were 2 occasions in the second half where he really did come inside and was trying to occupy that number 10 spot, where he miscontrolled it or mispassed it in the final third, where he got a bit more compressed the game, and that's where he's not good. So maybe coming in off the left gives him a little bit more space. Maybe. I
want to talk a bit more about Pogba and Ibrahimovic, because we've touched on them, but absolutely outstanding and vitally important for Ibrahimovic to get on the team sheet. And everyone now will be kind of disappointed that he's not available to play against Arsenal, whereas I think probably quite a lot of people would have been glad to see him given a sort of enforced rest based on his prior form. But there was some credence for the idea that the underlying numbers are still quite good, and are pointing to the fact that it was a blip rather than a kind of serious deterioration in ability levels. He just took his two goals really, really well, and just kind of very forceful and present, and his touch was good and a lot of his decision making was good. I mean, there was one terrible ball where he tried to fire a ball to Rooney, and it reminded me of the story of Dwight York signing for Man United, and in training Roy Keane absolutely smashing a pass at him and then going, Cantona would have trapped it. It felt a bit like that. It's like, I don't know, name some brilliant player Ibrahimovic has played with, he would have trapped it. Ibrahimovic is like, instead of saying Cantona would have trapped it, he'd say, I would have trapped that.
Well, quite, yeah. Well, no, because he'd have talked about himself in the third person.
Zlatan would have trapped that.
Yeah, I mean, true. Yeah, I think most of his all-round play was very good. I wouldn't blame him for that one. You know, he's hit a sharp pass into the centre forward.
Oh, it was a terrible pass. That is not Rooney's fault. That was at 100 miles an hour. But he hit it with the velocity of a shot.
Yeah, no, he didn't. Anyway, his first goal. I mean, Rooney gets the assist. Really, it was all about Zlatan. No, nice controlled turn. It's the second touch that makes the goal. Beats the defender, and then he's hit a sharp shot quite close to the keeper. I think Big Dave would have definitely saved that one, but you're not going to take that one away from Zlatan, are you? He really, really needed that goal.
And in a way, I think Pogba needed the goal too. He needs those to keep coming. A goal from the very top drawer, an absolute peach. In fact, talking of Cantona, not a million miles away from the volley against Liverpool, just in the way it went perfectly through a crowd of players without even hitting any of their aura, basically. Like, it just picked the perfect line through the defence. At first I thought it had taken a deflection, but no, it was just an incredibly sweet hit.
Yeah, what a waste of money, hey?
And that goal was like vital to United, because even though they'd started strongly, you do kind of think if Swansea had got a goal, they would have kind of deflated a little bit, probably.
Who, the United team? Well, I mean, they certainly did in Turkey, and I guess we have to get onto that in a bit. But it's good United started strongly. I mean, actually, Swansea were bright for the opening few minutes, weren't they? They looked like they had a bit of confidence. Obviously, United's opening goal just destroyed all of that, didn't it? And it's the kind of fragility of confidence that United have been displaying in recent times. So, yeah, the game was over by half-time, and I guess that will count for most of the lack of intensity that United displayed during the second half. Although, I don't know, what do you think? Do you think Jose will be happy with that? Because it wasn't his substitutions that dropped United's intensity. It was very much the players, and some of Swansea. I guess they decided they'd won and they were going to switch off a bit, which, given what happened over the weekend with Chelsea's performance, which was outstanding, and Liverpool, sadly, also outstanding. Let's not talk about that too much. Neither of them dropped their intensity at all.
Yeah, and that is potentially telling. I'm not. Was Liverpool or Liverpool at home?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that maybe makes a little bit of a difference, the fact that United were on the road versus those two teams both being at home. But still, it was unquestionably, I mean, I was joking about you starting with a negative earlier, but it was unquestionably a little disappointing, and it kind of left you, when the second half of a game is really flat and bad, it's hard to take the texture of the first half performance as the thing you remember from the game. But I think that probably should be, because when you're 3-0 up at half time, of course you're right, those two other teams kept at it in a way that United didn't. But I wonder whether they're operating from a kind of more confident platform in a way, and United have a bit of a greater need to solidify. Not that they solidified. But I did want to say a word for Phil Jones, who... he's become a complete figure of ridicule and fun, Phil Jones, and completely understandably so. There's the injury proneness. There's, as we said, he really stalled out his development. But there's a good footballer in there somewhere, isn't there?
I suppose so, yep. He's more acquainted with the treatment table than the pitch, sadly. And, I'm sure most of it's not his fault. I'm sure he looks after himself in an extremely professional way, and it's all bad luck and all of that. But it's, I don't know if there's really that much time for sentimentality in football, really. He's not fulfilled the promise at all. We can keep talking about him fulfilling some kind of promise, but he's now been at the club, 6-7 years? I'm not sure.
A long time,
A long time.
I don't think it's 7 years, but it's a long time.
We know what the pattern is. I mean, you said earlier, just coming back to your previous point about, people will sort of remember that second half. There's an interesting book called Homo Deus, which is by Yuval Noah Harari, Israeli anthropologist, who looks into a load of studies, sidetracking here, he looks into a load of studies and says that people remember two things, really, in all sorts of walks of life: peak and end point. So, you'll remember the goals and how the last 10 minutes of a game finished, or 15 minutes or whatever. And, it's just human psychology. And it's very true, right? And I suppose if you got the algorithm to go cut the highlights, it would look very different than a human doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think about that. I think about that when we do the show all the time. I think about it's so easy to filter out loads of the experience of watching that game in retrospect. But I thought, in the first half, you mentioned that Swansea, that it was. I don't even think it was the first goal that deflated Swansea. I think it was when United went up a gear. That was what deflated Swansea. I think, we've struggled so much this season that it feels a bit odd to be saying this, but there is something about a team with Pogba and Ibrahimovic can't half deflate an opposition, can't half kind of give some of that feeling that, United fans were used to seeing other teams having against us of, oh, we're up against it here, lads.
True. But then to counter that, and it's a very good point, to counter that, I give you two things. Marcus Rojo and Wayne Rooney.
I was sure you were going to go with Rooney and Fellaini. That's what I thought you were going to go.
Oh, and Fellaini. So there you go. I win 3-2.
No, you don't. No. Come on, I see your Rooney, Fellaini and Marcus Rojo, and I raise you a David De Gea.
Okay.
I'm going to put a Juan Mata in the middle of the table.
How much do I get for a Phil Jones?
You get like less than a quarter of a Mata for a Phil Jones. So yeah, that game was obviously vitally important because we're a long way off the pace in the league. Like there's a big point swing to make up, but also because the vibe was seriously neg, man. It was a seriously nego vibo after the very debilitating and miserable trip to Turkey in the middle of the week.
I mean, it really was miserable, wasn't it? I mean, that was. I was going to say it was one of the worst away performances in Europe we've had, but we've had a lot of really, really bad away performances in Europe recently. But it was bad.
Oh, yeah, it was bad. And that's now 6 games, I think, or no, 7 games without a win in Europe. When everyone was predicting a win, and I kept kind of coming back to the fact that we just have not put in a performance for over a year away in Europe. And I don't think when we come to preview Zorya in a week or two, whenever it is, I'm going to be predicting that we don't put in a performance again, because that was just so evident that we don't care about the Europa League. And I think a lot of the analysis of the kind of crisis around Man United analysis that followed that game bugged me a little bit, because I think it was coming on the back of a Burnley performance where we were, we played as well as we have, really, apart from putting the ball in the net. And then it was the Europa League, a competition in which literally Sergio Romero has literally got a game in this competition. That's how uninterested in it United are fundamentally. So, yeah, I thought not enough people were going, yeah, but all this is fair enough, but it is the Europa League and literally no one cares.
True. Very true, but a very strong starting 11.
Yeah, but a strong starting 11 that clearly wasn't motivated to be in that competition. And a strong starting 11 in a way, but with a few kind of pointers that this wasn't really, really the starting 11. Like, there's no. I suspect Herrera might not have played if he was able to play in this game. And Rooney ended up playing up front, which, that was a pretty good indicator that he was that it wasn't being taken super duper seriously.
Yeah, true, and I guess it took all of about a minute and change, not very many seconds, to ruin United's confidence and planning, didn't it? With a pretty spectacular goal. Yeah, I mean, lots of credit to Moussa Sow for the athletic sort of twist and overhead and the connection.
I'm predicting we're going to hear the word shin in a minute. No.
No. Only Rooney shins an overhead. I'm kidding. That's a joke. That's a joke for all the hate mail comes in. He did shin it though. I mean, some luck on actually getting it goal bound, I'd say. But, all credit to Fenerbahce because they fully deserved their victory, didn't they? I mean, on top all night.
Oh, yeah.
And I was trying to work out who was the worst United player. It definitely wasn't Rooney in Turkey. I mean, there were some bad ones. Blint and Rojo, both terrible at the back. Darmian and Shaw. Shaw was very bad as well. We'll come on to that. Yeah, he's got a problem, Luke Shaw, hasn't he? None of the midfield players could really get any credit out of the game at all. Rashford, terrible on the right before he got hooked. So, Martial, a few neat runs, a few good runs, maybe a hint that he's coming back, but nothing spectacular in his play.
I tracked everything that Martial did for an article because that's what I was assigned. That was my brief for that game, and he was by far our best attacking option all the way through that game. Like, it was more than just a few neat runs. There was the through ball for Rooney, which we need to talk about. We need to talk about because, like, at the end of the half, I was looking at the numbers for that article at the end of the first half, and I was like looking, going, why is Martial not credited with a key pass? And it's like, because Rooney couldn't get a shot away, even though he got the ball like 1-on-1 with the keeper in 6 yards of space. He just Astro first touched it out or back to the defence or something. I mean, we joke about Rooney's first touch, but that was a next level dreadful first touch from Rooney.
I have nothing to say.
He scored a very nice goal at the end of that game. He had a lot of space and he used it very well. And I did feel that was quite significant to the way he played against Swansea, as I think I mentioned earlier.
No, it was a great hit. A great hit, and Rooney's still got that, hasn't he? He can, amid the dross, there are still the moments.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said either last week or the week before in response to a listener question, he'll definitely get that record, and that kind of goal is why, isn't it? And I guess he's going to get a run in the side now between injuries and suspensions and his own form.
Yeah, but does he really deserve one?
Should we discuss that at length next week during the international break for our Arsenal preview?
Thought you meant bonus content. We'll do a 45-minute Patreon backer bonus content on Rooney.
No, but literally nobody wants that. The general level of United's performance. Pogba was all right until he went off injured, and that was a real worry at that point. And I thought Mourinho made two really big mistakes in that game. Mourinho's coming for a lot of criticism and a lot of like very knee-jerk, aggressive criticism, which I think has been a bit unfounded. But I did think he made two pretty substantial errors, and the first one was starting with Rooney up front, which, it was starting with a kind of degree of handicap. It's like, adding a few strokes in a golf game or something. And then I think bringing on Ibrahimovic for Pogba was a very strange decision because he had a lot of options to help make that game more fluid, and instead he kind of went with the very, very super static Ibrahimovic.
And dumping Rooney back into midfield, which doesn't help either.
Absolutely.
Yeah, look, overall it was just, as I said, one of the worst United away performances in Europe, but such a pattern now, isn't it? And not just in Europe under Jose. I just feel there's just something just a touch negative sometimes about Jose away from home. He's almost beginning to be predictable, except of course in this one he actually picked a pretty attacking lineup. But Arsenal coming in a couple of weeks' time, I think we can assume that Fellaini will definitely play in that one because he's tended to pick him in the big games. So I think we can probably assume that Mata won't play, unless injuries and suspensions get in the way. And it just feels like there's a side in here waiting to burst out, and all our best players, mainly, apart from Big Dave, are attacking players. And somehow we're managing to hamstring many of them in each game. I don't know how you feel about that. And that wasn't really the Fenerbahce game, but it feels like it's a bit of a pattern.
Yeah, and I think Mata will play against we've got an international break. All we have to talk about next time we do a podcast is the Arsenal game, so let's save it. But I think Mata will play on the right again as a false right winger, because I tell you who ain't going to play against Arsenal, or maybe ever again, and that's Henrik Mkhitaryan, who came on against Fenerbahce, needed to be absolutely perfect, but instead very nearly gave away a goal-scoring opportunity. Well, he did give away an opportunity, but Big Dave made the save. And, talk about remembering peaks. I can't help thinking that's what will stand out for Mourinho. Not even in the matchday squad, in a kind of injury-hit matchday squad, there was no place for Mkhitaryan.
Yeah, but how to destroy a player? I don't know what's happening on the training ground. All these stories about him mentally weak and crying and all of that kind of stuff. But I don't know how you can possibly build up a player's confidence if he is a bit mentally weak by criticising him publicly when bringing him back into the team after having not played and clearly won't be fit. And then, dumping him at the first opportunity. I mean, it's Van Gaal levels of destroying a player. Van Gaal did it to Memphis, and now Jose's doing it to Mkhitaryan. I mean, Jose's doing the same thing to Memphis, I suppose, but no one had the expectation that he'd be getting much game time. It's devastating, because you got £30 million a player in Memphis and £35 million a player in Mkhitaryan, who are getting almost no football at all, and their value is nothing.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's Van Gaal-esque, you say, but it's also Mourinho-esque, because his career is littered with players that have received this treatment, because you're in the boat or you're out of the boat. And that's it. It comes at a cost. Mourinho's methods come at a cost. And hopefully something will change, because Mkhitaryan is such a fantastic player when he's on form, and it would be amazing to see him at United doing well. But my underlying assumption at the moment, my working assumption, is that it's just not going to happen. It's gone full Kaggle. There's no turning back from this. I don't see it's possible, but unless he and Mourinho have a real meeting of the minds, it seems unlikely.
Well, there was a story out earlier in the week that Mourinho has 8 players on his hit list. I don't think, was Mkhitaryan on that one? I can't remember now.
No, but that hit list was... There's always these stories. Like the Van Gaal one was proved completely wide of the mark, and I feel like...
Very true, yeah. And a few people were pretty annoyed with that list, mainly because it didn't include Rooney or Fellaini.
There's also been this absolutely... In fact, we had a listener question about it, which I'll dig out later to give a shout out. But there's been this article that went properly viral. That's just a roundup of gossip, basically, kind of claiming to be really well sourced. And I was reading it, and it's on something called the United Pages, I think, which I don't believe I've really heard of before. And it just read like a collection of absolute nonsense rumours stitched together in a way that sounded like kind of trying to build a convincing narrative. But I think already there's plenty of evidence that was pretty much nonsense. And that regurgitated that kind of Mkhitaryan crying in the dressing room rumour. And I just think we don't know what's happened, but what we do know for sure is that Mkhitaryan is not in the boat. And I guess talking of Mourinho and his management of players, a lot of people seemed a bit upset by some of his comments after the Swansea game. Did you see what he said?
Actually, I didn't. I had to jump in a car. What did he say?
So he was he was asked by the interviewer. Basically said, you've said, Jose, that the players are here today are the ones that want to be here today. And, that's obviously excluding Shaw and excluding Mkhitaryan. And Mourinho said, no, that's a little bit strong to say that they want to be here. But, what I believe is that in all sport, there is an extent to which sometimes you have to sacrifice some aspects of the body for the sake of the team, for the sake of elite level achievement, not just in football, but in every sport. And I think there are some players where there are some cultural issues, not just with the player, but with the people around him, where, everything has to be 100% perfect before they'll play. And a lot of people are like, oh, you can't believe he's talking about Luke Shaw. Maybe he wasn't. We don't know he was talking about Luke Shaw, but Shaw, Mkhitaryan, like especially for Shaw, having come back from that big long-term injury, maybe a bit more sensitivity is required. But what I really thought about that is there's been lots of talk about Mourinho losing it and Mourinho not having his kind of special Mourinho-ness anymore. But to me, this is absolutely part of the deal, that you're going to get siege mentality, you're going to get a core group of players who are with the manager and will run through walls for him, and therefore you're going to get success. That's how he does it.
Well, it is how he does it. I wouldn't say we've got that yet.
Oh, no,
right?
definitely not.
So I wouldn't conflate that he's managed to do that, because they didn't run through any walls. They wouldn't have run through an invisible wall in Fenerbahce. They just couldn't give a toss. But what he did do in the post-match comments is, reading them, he's contrasted Smalling and Shaw with Daley Blind. He said, Smalling said he wasn't 100% fit. Shaw said he didn't feel in condition to play. Daley Blind isn't fit, but he wanted to put himself on the bench. And that's the kind of thing that I guess some managers that we've had in the recent past, definitely Fergie wouldn't have done, right? It's unlikely that they would have called out specific players and questioned their mentality. I mean, and Mourinho did this after Fenerbahce very strongly. He talked about their lack of preparation, their lack of conditioning, their lack of mental preparation for the game, and called out their sort of mental weaknesses. So maybe it'll work. Maybe he'll get that core group of 15, 20 players that will run through walls for him. Or maybe it'll go totally pear-shaped, and this is what everyone's worried about, in the way it did at Chelsea. And then that kind of thing that Mourinho does looks a bit like he's losing it. And in the case of Chelsea, losing the entire dressing room. And we're not there, clearly, but that's the worry.
And here are the kind of couple of counters to that. I think those are very reasonable worries. The couple of counters are, one, there have been a few games this season where we've looked a lot better in the second half after flat first half performances. And that I always find that a bit heartening as kind of how the squad is viewing the manager at the moment. There's a bit of hope if the manager can kind of get them going in the second half. And the other one is, I don't think I would be expecting it to work yet, because this is about the process. This is about the filtration process, where you're building the team basically at this point, and then you start kind of really solidifying that loyalty when you've got that group that you're working with who are, really your players, and you can see it and feel it, and that relationship's built. I was going back and because today we're recording this on the 6th, which is the 30th anniversary of Fergie taking over, and I went back for a Bleacher Report article and read all the stuff he said about his first season, and he hardly talks about the football at all in his first season. All he really talks about is taking on the drinking culture. And of course, United's cultural issues are very different now, and Mourinho's taking over. He's got huge money to spend, and there's the structures are in place and all that, so he doesn't have to make that kind of root and branch change. So you would expect results quicker. But I do think short-termism has reached a ridiculous level, and we should be allowing him to dig in, do his thing, and see how it goes for quite a long time before we start kind of even really judging how well it's going, because of how deep the kind of rot of mentality has set in the last 3 years. There is a major cultural shift needed in the club.
That may be true. The question about how long that takes, though, is an important one, because we've shifted culturally quite a few times in recent seasons. Right? We shifted to the David Moyes culture of fear and loathing, self-loathing in his case, to Van Gaal's philosophy, which became more and more ingrained over the 2 years, and now undoing that philosophy, which Mourinho has talked about as well, and said specifically it's going to take him some time to undo what Van Gaal instilled. But it's a big question, because how long can it take? Because right now United are 7 points off the top, and the inconsistency is such that you can't guarantee that United are going to make inroads into that at all, or won't fall further behind on the top four. So the models will show that United at this stage right now won't make the top four. So you kind of got to say, well, would the club still stick with Mourinho if United didn't make the top four? They haven't done with Moyes or Van Gaal, and therefore, what has changed this time? Are they now saying, well, those decisions were wrong in the past, and we'll give Mourinho his 3-year contract because we believe in the process or whatever, and it's a long way from that, of course, but definitely no guarantee that United will make the top four this season, given the inconsistency and given the levels that City, Arsenal, Chelsea and Spurs and Liverpool are at.
No, I mean, and there are muddles, like in terms of points per game and stuff, that are pretty bad, but United's underlying numbers are good, aren't they? Their XG likes Man United, as they say at the moment. We are a few points off where we should be. I mean, we're at least 4 points off where we should be. You don't need any stats to tell you that the Stoke and Burnley games, that's 4 points that the manager did not cost us those 4 points, nor did kind of the collective culture of the club or whatever. The question of how long we give him is I don't know, you're right in saying that United didn't stick with either Moyes or Van Gaal after they didn't qualify for the Champions League, but I mean, maybe that was just because they didn't qualify for the Champions League, but really that feels like it was actually about two different things. And one, the Moyes thing was about a recognition of the complete catastrophe of the appointment, and the Van Gaal thing was about the fact that Mourinho was free now. I wonder whether if Mourinho hadn't been free, Van Gaal would have got another season. I don't think that's impossible by any means. So yeah. Oh, by the way, talking of Moyes, he's been piping up again. He's been at it again, hasn't he? He's
talking about his reign,
yeah.
which was his reign at Manchester United was interesting. Yeah, I thought kings and queens had reigns. Of course, in some countries, country of your motherland, they used to chop the heads off kings and queens to end their reign. Seemed appropriate.
And with Moyes, he said, perhaps the Mourinho and Van Gaal struggles have put my reign into context. And I kind of think perhaps your performances at Sociedad and Sunderland have put the decision to appoint you as manager of Manchester United into some context, David. But, let's... that was literally through gritted teeth, that was. I think he might be my least favourite person in football. I think he might be number one. Maybe that's vastly unfair. Anyway, this has been a lot of... we were talking about that Fenerbahce game. Swansea game was a big positive. We don't know where the direction of the great big Mourinho project yet. But there's cause for either hope or despair if you look close enough. And I think really the only conclusion we can draw is we don't know. But what I think is a very good antidote for all this is some straight up Man United 90s nostalgia. Are you up for some of that, Ed?
Sure.
So I was absolutely delighted this week to have a conversation with Sam Pilger who worked at United in the 90s and then left to work for 442 magazine and since then has left and gone freelance, and he writes for 442. He writes a weekly column in Bleacher Report, which I'm a big fan of, so this is a fantastic conversation which we talked about him hanging out with David Beckham, making him a sandwich and all that sort of thing, so have a listen. I'm absolutely delighted that you could join us today, Sam. So I wonder if you could start with what it was like to work at United in the 90s.
It was fantastic, really. It was my first proper job. Started in 1996. I'd finished university the year earlier. I'd done some good old-fashioned work experience at the Manchester United magazine. And then I was my sort of break, if you like. I was traveling in America with my girlfriend, now wife, and noticed that the New England Revolution were being managed by one Frank Stapleton. So I put in a call to the United magazine, said, would you like an interview with him? They said yes, and I interviewed him in Boston. About the 80s, being United legend, and when I got back, I got a job offer to work for the United magazine. I was staff writer there, and then deputy editor for 3.5 years. And as people probably listening to this that weren't born then, but it was a very different media landscape with no Twitter, no Facebook. There was no manunited.com. There was no real United website. And so the power of the club magazine was enormous. No MUTV. So the club magazine was, when I started working for it, was the biggest selling football magazine and the fourth biggest selling men's magazine, sort of behind FHM and Loaded. So it was basically the magazine and the program was a bit more corporate and whereas we tried on the magazine to be a bit more I hesitate to use the word edgy, but
edgy might be strong.
Fun,
maybe.
A bit more fun. That sometimes got us into trouble with the club, and I remember during the Sky, when Sky were it was a different time. It just wouldn't happen now. As when Sky were looking to take over United, we sort of, and 96% of the fan base were against it. We thought, well, we're the voice of the club, but also the voice of the fans. How do you balance it? And so we sort of got into some problems there. And I remember doing it. Yeah, we did an interview with Martin Edwards, where he sort of floated the idea that Ferguson wouldn't be kept on as a sort of ambassador and so on, and that got us into trouble and so on. So we tried to balance it, have something that wasn't just a corporate newsletter.
How did you handle the Sky thing then? What were the decisions made? Because that's fascinating that you would have said something about it rather than gone with the party line.
That's right. Well, it was almost to give others a platform. As the magazine itself, we were part of the club and we might soon be owned by Sky too. But it was to give a platform to others, to the fanzines, to have different voices, really, and that's what we tried to do throughout. We had a column with Paul Hayward, obviously now the Telegraph, about other football matters, and he could talk about it there. We also had a column that didn't go down so well, but it was quite funny, called Outside Old Trafford, because the opening page was called Inside Old Trafford. We had a column called Outside Old Trafford with a guy called Ivor Badil, who was David Badil's brother and a Chelsea fan. It just wound up United fans, really, and sort of gave up the different perspective. But at least there was debate. At least it was a bit different. Again, probably wouldn't happen now.
So what was the biggest trouble you ever got in with the club when you were at the magazine?
The thing is that it's that dreadful word copy approval. The club actually didn't read the magazine prior to publication for the vast majority of the time I was there. It changed just after I left. And so the biggest trouble, I think it was, things like, God, this dates it, but players just not being happy, God knows, Jordi Cruyff or somebody, and just saying that, or just speaking honestly. It's funny. I mean, this is the late 90s. I was there 96, 97, 98, 99, big years, and yet we did have a huge degree of freedom. Now, obviously, Inside United, as it's called now, I'm sure they're more in step with the club, but also the club would read it and filter out anything they didn't want.
So that's an incredible time, as you mentioned, to be working at Old Trafford. So what was your access like at that time? What could you do to get access to the players and the staff and things?
Well, it was incredible. It was a great time, because essentially you would the whole time I was there, I was at the Cliff, which I'm so grateful for, because I left in January 2000, and literally they went to Carrington that week. Obviously I've been to Carrington since, but in terms of my time, and I'm so grateful for it, was at the Cliff, which was just so full of character, and it sort of symbolised the time where you had the multi-millionaires, huge big footballers. You can't get much bigger than Eric Cantona and David Beckham, but there they were in an area of Manchester, side by side with the fans, and there was greater access for everybody. I'm sure United fans remember queuing up for autographs during summer holidays and so on. But in terms of the press, and we were club press, but we weren't seen as part of the club. But we just sat in the waiting room and approached people as they left. So if we wanted to interview Roy Keane in the next week's magazine, we'd just wait there and approach Roy as he went to his car, simple as that, really. So the access was fantastic because the demands were not so much. As I said, no MUTV, no social media. Club magazine, the club program, strangely, didn't really do many interviews. So, there was the football press was stronger then. There was 442 and Total Football and Goal and so on, but 90 minutes. But in terms of us, we just had a free run at it. So if we wanted, we got David Beckham's first big interview after the 1998 World Cup, Roy Keane, just anybody really. It was wonderful. It was like, well, who should we interview next month? And we just approached them. I can't remember them really saying no. So I started in August 1996. Anybody who was at the club during that 3.5 years, I got to know pretty well as players and interviewed several times.
It's an amazing thing. So who were some of your favourite people to interview?
I really enjoyed interviewing Andy Cole.
Wow, honestly, if you'd given me 20 guesses, I'm not sure I would have guessed Andy Cole, having seen him interviewed a few times.
Well, this is it. I mean, I was always a huge fan of Andy Cole's on the pitch. I felt he became a whipping boy just for becoming an easy target. He came in, he scored. I still remember the stats. He scored 12 goals in 16 games and was blamed for United not winning the league in 95. And those were saves by Ludok Mikloško, not misses. And so I was always. He did have a difficult time in 95-96 season, but then it came good, and there was certainly a happy ending. So I was always a fan of him on the pitch because he never stopped fighting, and he was under a huge amount of pressure. And I was lucky enough to interview him. First time was February 97, and I expected, unfortunately, not less so now, he's a club ambassador, but at the time he did have this sort of surly image, if you like. Whereas I found him an absolute joy. And the difference with interviews was I've done hundreds of interviews. When you turn off the tape recorder, people jump up from their seat, great, and shoot out the door, a lot of them. He would stay, have a cup of tea, chat. He was very friendly. He was very funny. He wasn't at all like his image at the time. And I felt like his agent, which at the time was Paul Stretford, who was obviously Rooney's, had probably done him a disservice. Sorry, Paul, but he had this very surly, difficult image, but I found him absolutely lovely, and I really enjoyed interviewing him. He was friendly and funny and laid back, not at all like. The difference was, and this is all about perception, when Dwight Yorke joined, it was all about, that trademark smile and, he's happy-go-lucky, he's from the Caribbean, he's very laid back. I found him to be the opposite. I found him to be quite difficult. That big smile was a bit of an act, really, in my experience, and he wasn't nearly as sort of friendly, as laid back as he liked to let on. So I hugely, enjoyed interviewing Andy, Roy Keane, of course, that goes without saying. Peter Schmeichel, just because they're real, football people and had opinions and didn't dodge a question. I wrote a book at the time with Gary and Phil Neville called For Club and Country, which was the diary of the 97-98 season. So I got to know them both well and get to know their personalities. And I can see the career Gary has forged for himself post-football, having, interviewed him 2 or 3 times a week, producing the book. David Beckham was good. David Beckham was not so, he was just at the start. I interviewed him in the autumn of 96 and then 98, 99. So, around the treble year. And there were different times, I'd meet him at the Cliff, jump in his car, he'd take me home, and we'd do the interview in his living room. He'd make me lunch and then drop me at Piccadilly Station. It was different times. You're lucky if you get sort of 5-10 minutes in a hotel room now, a sort of a junket. So, they were, I suppose that's early 90s. A bit later, I enjoyed interviewing. I did the first ever interview with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. That was nice. He just scored 2 goals on his European debut, and we took him to Armani in Manchester the next day, and he was very sort of uncomfortable, but sort of enjoying it, and kitted him out for a photo shoot. He was he was lovely, yeah. And 3 years later, obviously scored the winning goal. And Paul Scholes was it's funny, as you'd imagine. He didn't ever really like doing interviews. Nicky Butt was all right. I was lucky enough to do them all, really. I'm just scanning through my head, thinking of that. I mean, later on, I suppose the treble season, Jaap Stam was wonderful. I sort of forged a good friendship with him, and he came on board to the magazine and did a column because he was Dutch and he was honest and he just told it was like it was, and it was great, really. And then the Daily Telegraph picked up the column, and I then wrote the column with him fortnightly for the Daily Telegraph. But Jaap was great. He was just so honest and Dutch and upfront. So yeah, it was good times.
There's a few things I need to feed back. One, I'm glad that you said Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was nice. Otherwise, this whole interview just would never have gone out, because I wouldn't have wanted to break the illusion, because it's such a beautiful one. But the other thing is, was David Beckham a good cook? This feels like an important question at this juncture.
Do you know what? No, there was no heat involved in the lunch. It sort of. He just produced something from he produced something from, I think he also made me a sandwich or something. And the very strange moment where he handed me a can of Pepsi, and his girlfriend at the time, was on the side of the can of Pepsi. And I kind of said, do I mention that or so on, or. So, he wasn't a hugely good cook, yeah. And he just got some puppies, and they were called Snoop and Puff, after Snoop Doggy Dogg and Puff Daddy. So, yeah, I don't know. God, they probably wouldn't even be alive now, would they? Sorry, I was thinking of that, thinking, they're proper dogs now. But, yeah, that was 19 years ago. So he just got some puppies. And, he was very nice. He's very nice. As I said, I said, at the end of the day, I was at his house for about 2 or 3 hours. Gary Neville came over, and, it was... as I say, different times. Different times.
Did you ever have any dealings with Fergie?
Yes, I did. Not hugely. I was in my sort of early to mid 20s at the time, and when we would do Ferguson, we would get guys like Oliver Holt and Paul Hayward to interview him for us. We did that a bit. I used big Fleet Street names. For other players as well, I don't think they do that now. I haven't done for a long time. But it was too much of a treat not to. And so I interviewed him. I got to know him and did a few things for him. But in terms of a sit-down interview, I do remember actually sometimes one of the pleasures was going to the cliff and handing out the new issue of the magazine. And you would just hope that. I remember a terrifying moment. I sat on a bench with a pile of magazines, and Sir Alex sat next to me and said good morning and started leafing through it. And I just thought, oh God, I hope there's nothing in it. He's going to turn on me, give me the hair try. There were a few terrifying moments like that. But I sat down with him, and I laugh about it now. But it was. I realised how incredibly lucky I was to have half an hour, me and him in his office together. It was the summer of 1999. I didn't think I could design a better time to interview him. Clearly, United had just won the Champions League, the FA Cup, the Premier League, and he'd just been knighted about a week before. So I had to actually, after I call him Alex, so I call him Sir Alex. It was at the Cliff. Players hadn't come back yet for pre-season training. They were due back in a week. It was a sunny day. I just thought I could not be interviewing this man at any better time. And, he just won the European Cup, his lifetime's ambition. But during the interview, he was good and I enjoyed it, but he wasn't as laid back and as happy-go-lucky as I'd hoped. And I then realised about an hour afterwards, because he went from my interview to the press conference at Old Trafford to announce that United were withdrawing from the following season's FA Cup to play in the World Club Championships in Brazil, a decision he was not happy with and felt very uncomfortable with. So that was clearly playing on his mind. But yeah, I mean, I was I greatly enjoyed it. What would I have been at the time? About 26. he was in his 60s. He was very good.
What struck you about him from seeing him up close? Because I think the more time passes since he retires, the more. I mean, everyone knew he was special at the time, but the more abundantly obvious it becomes just how extraordinary it was. What struck you about him? Not necessarily just from that interview, but just being around the cliff and that sort of thing.
I think from that interview, I think that's a good example. I mean, as I said, he'd won the treble, never done by a major European nation before, or a British club. Won the European club, which just hung over him clearly. He would never, no matter what he did at Aberdeen, no matter what he did at United, it would just be used as a stick with beating with him. He didn't win the Champions League. Clearly, he won 2 in the end, but that was a huge weight off his shoulders. And yet, he had no time to reflect or interest. It was about the days. It was about the next season, the next challenge. It was about, that afternoon, the politics of withdrawing from the FA Cup. There was no, I wanted to reflect and wow and what a time and brilliant, and no, not interested. He was on to the next thing, that relentlessness that I mean, I remember growing up and thinking, wow, Sir Matt Busby won 5 league titles. Wow, that, 5. He won 13. It's barely believable. And I hate when people say, it will never be matched. It will never be matched, because, I mean, how can anyone predict the future? And I find that a bit tiresome. No one would have thought a Manchester United player would win 13 titles when, Alan Hansen said had 8 or 10 or whatever it was, 8, I think. Or that will never be matched. But so I hesitate to say that, but 13 league titles was incredible. So it was just that relentlessness, that ability not to reflect, but to build the team too with the characters that would do that. And the people like Roy Keane, who would absolutely be the epitome of him on the pitch, and Peter Schmeichel, people that just were not happy with just winning. They had to win again and again, and it's a cliche, but as United have experienced recently, that relentlessness, that absolute desire, is very difficult to repeat. So it was, I was there 3.5 years, and to have a sort of front row seat to interview him and to what was very special. But yeah, I think it was just his relentlessness.
So you mentioned that you ended up ghostwriting Jaap Stam's column. You interviewed him for the latest issue of 442 down in Reading. What do you make of him as a manager? He definitely seems a very reflective and thoughtful character.
Well, I think it's the way he's done it that's really interesting, because he's taken 9 years from retiring to taking a manager's job. And in that time, he has, it's quite funny, he said he retired and he was offered a place in the Big Brother house in Holland, and this sort of thing. But so if you look at the career he's had, Manchester United, PSV Eindhoven, Manchester United, Lazio, AC Milan, Ajax, Gus Hiddink, Sir Alex Ferguson, Carlo Ancelotti, the managers he's played under. And the things he had won, you think he could clearly have walked into a job within this thing, but it was very much the Dutch way of doing his apprenticeship, and he spent 9 years doing that. He looking after the Ajax reserve team. He was assistant manager, managed Daley Blind for a year when they won the title, 13-14. Frank de Boer. So he really has taken his apprenticeship to learn the game properly. And then he didn't want to stay comfortable and cosy at Holland. He's come to Reading, and he's doing well. He started well. He's possession football, but possession football to create chances, not just for the sake of it, like another Dutchman we remember well. Create goals and attack. Reading finished about 19th last year, I think, and they're up near the playoffs now. So he's started well. He's certainly got the background and the the calibre. So, yeah, I asked him the obvious question about an Old Trafford return, and he's ambitious. He wants to manage at the very highest level. So, it's great to see him again. He's a lovely guy. But again, Ferguson chose well. That was why Ferguson was a great manager. He found the characters. Of course, people know good footballers, but they have to find the characters. And Stam had that as a player, was utterly relentless. And again, I know people, I sometimes trigger it on Twitter, the debate, but I genuinely can't remember a better player, defender, never mind for United, in the Premier League. I think in his 3 years at United, I remember him getting beaten about 3 times, like for pace or getting turned or he'd have this incredible thing where he'd run alongside the forward because he was so tall and fast, open his long legs, and he was quick. But he didn't dive in or clear the ball or a sliding tackle. He'd actually draw level, nick the ball off them, and then pass it out. He was incredible. So if you can take that into management, he'll do well.
It's interesting. I just was thinking about Ryan Giggs and the comparison between the sort of, I don't know how fair it is, but the general received wisdom about Ryan Giggs, which is that he wants a shot at a big job straight away, versus kind of going and really learning the trade. It's a very different approach, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, I suppose Ryan was Moyes' assistant for a year, wasn't he, while he was still playing, and then for 2 years with Van Gaal after he'd retired. And so, that felt right to keep him within the family. It would have been wrong for him to leave, but maybe it would have been better if he hadn't left. I think looking back, if he was ever going to get the United job, I know it goes against having an apprenticeship, but it would have been immediately rather than, when he got a sort of tarred with the Van Gaal regime. But yeah, I mean, it's a British. If you look in Holland, Mark Overmars, Dennis Bergkamp, Jaap Stam, they don't just grab the first job or a big job. They do, they learn their trade. And that's not to say Ryan hasn't. Of course, he's done his badges and he's learned a lot as an assistant manager. So, but it would be a risk, it's strange that, Swansea, the Welsh homecoming and everything like that. Went for Bob Bradley, of course, hugely experienced manager, but, if Ryan's not landing those jobs. But it's difficult because, of course, inevitably as a United player, you want to get back to Old Trafford. That's the job you want. That's the job he wanted. And that's the job he frankly thought he was going to get, especially after Van Gaal. But, how many times have we seen it? Brian Robson, Steve Bruce, Mark Hughes, Roy Keane. The fairy tale doesn't really happen, and he comes back. So he'll get his chance soon, I hope, and obviously he's doing the punditry now, and that is a loss. And I know Gary Neville sort of doesn't like it being mentioned, but it is a shame that so many, talented players just hate the punditry. Rio Ferdinand and Gary. I know obviously at Valencia in England he has had a bit of a go at it. And Brian's now doing it, and Roy Keane falls into it too. They are a loss to the game, but you can understand why a team like Swansea wanted experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking of wanting experience, United went with José Mourinho, and I think we'll finish with this question because it's the one that everyone's wondering about. What do you make of United at the moment?
It's not the start we expected. Really, I thought it would be better. I think the thing that alarms me is that Mourinho knew he had this job January, February. I had a very good authority. He knew he had it early, and that was proven, and he got it. And of course, there was the story about him sending the dossier to United and all the homework he'd done. So he had a good run up at it. I mean, that was the problem with Moyes. He was at Everton and came late. Van Gaal was with Holland at the World Cup and came late. But Mourinho was out of work and had a huge run up at it to pick the players. Of course, he wanted 4 players. He got those 4 players, and he had a long time to plan. So I think with that run up, United fans can be naturally disappointed and surprised, really, at how not the results, because that happens. The Burnley result, it felt a bit like Stoke, but it was worse. But they happen where the ball does not go in. The keeper has an amazing game. And, again, I think the things about Ibrahimovic is overdone because, he was inches away from... I mean, what goalkeeper is going to save that scissor kick? I mean, honestly. But and otherwise, there'd be these great still shots of that scissor kick as connection, and we'd all be going, wow, back post scissor kick, fantastic. So... It is tight, but I think the thing is, it's not having an identity. It's not having that awful word, a brand of football that he's imposing on United. We can see that with Klopp at Liverpool. We can see that very quickly. I mean, he had a bigger run-up, obviously, started last October, but Guardiola at City, we can see that. We're still scratching our heads to go, well, what's the plan? And we could see at Liverpool, that was old school Mourinho, and again. It would have worked perfectly if Ibrahimovic. Now that was a miss. The header. If he'd put that in, United probably would have held it. It'd be a famous 1-0 win. So he has been not unlucky, but things have marginally gone against him. He easily could have won 4 to 6 more points, and things would be looking differently. But I think in terms of the plan, Paul Pogba, bringing him in and playing him initially in a midfield 2. Clearly not rating Wayne Rooney, but starting him, it feels like, the Rooney issue, you could say, well, he gave him enough rope to hang himself and he wasn't impressive and now he's dropped him and no one does. But I don't think there would have been an outcry if he'd dropped Rooney in August for the Charity Shield or for the first games. And this is Mourinho. He had... United were on the floor again. He had that leverage. He had that power base. So I don't know if he thought Rooney would be better or he was giving him the rope, as I said. But that's been a bit of a waste. That's played somebody that's clearly in decline, clearly not good enough, and it's cost us a few points by playing Rooney. But Pogba is the concern because it seems to have been corrected now. But bringing him and playing in a midfield 2. That's not where he succeeded with Juventus. That's not why United bought him. And Mourinho, I'm sure, must have been watching the European Championships. With Deschamps played him in midfield 2, and he was neutered. He wasn't the play. He was meant to be the poster boy of the tournament, but he was played out of position in too far back in more of a defensive role. And then Mourinho spends £90 million. And plays him in that position again. And that was thinking, hang on, you've just bought someone invested £90 million. Surely you've got a plan of what to do with him. But he's played him at number 10, he's played in midfield 3, he's played in midfield 2. That's a concern. So that's my concern is that he hasn't had an identity that he's tried to imprint on the club immediately, and he's still... And Mkhitaryan, I know you're a fan. I'm a huge fan. It's hugely exciting. And yet, I'm not party to what's going on there, but that's very strange. I mean, this isn't somebody... This is, the Bundesliga's best player, a hugely talented... A kind of a finished product, really. And... He's and the rumours are, what he's not sure about. What do you mean he's not sure about him? He bought him, and surely the way about being not sure about him is playing him. He hasn't been played. He played, when he came back from Armenia with an injury against City, and that wasn't a game to be thrown into. And so, we could go on and on, but there are reasons for concern. But this is still a man who won the Premier League last calendar year. 2015, not last season, obviously, but 18 months ago he was lifting the Premier League trophy. So the yesterday man label stuck with Van Gaal, obviously, but this is somebody who won the Premier League title last year. So I hope for better, but and I think there will be better. I think. Sorry for this very long answer, but words are what make up a podcast. But
that's a long answer again.
Yes, but I mean the defence as well. I mean, if you want, I can say everything's going to be rosy, and I think he probably will succeed. But the defence again, I mean, he was somebody whose success had been based on really wily defenders. Pepe, Sergio Ramos, John Terry, Carvalho. And Bailly is a fantastic signing, but I felt we needed more in the centre of defence, and I was surprised that he didn't buy a bigger central defender. I'm a big fan of Daley Blind. I really am. I think he always does well. I think he's an essential part of this team, this squad, be it at left back or even at centre half. Even at midfield, he hasn't played in for a while. But I do think United were another central defender short. It's kind of been proven in a way so far. So, lots to ponder.
Brilliant. Well, Sam, thank you very much for your time. You can find Sam on Twitter and follow along. You write very interesting things on Bleacher Report, which is obviously that's something that I plug every week on the show. But
glad to you, Paul. Of course, glad to you. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Sam.
Cheers.
Massive thanks to Sam for sparing so much time for us. I really loved talking to him, and I hope you guys enjoyed listening to it. That section of the show was brought to you by the good people who have backed the show at patreon.com/rantcast. We have opted for a crowdfunding model rather than an ad-supported model because we like the idea of that a lot better. And one of the things that we're able to do because of that, the Patreon existing, is take the time to do guest interviews and stuff during the week. So there'll be more of those coming throughout the season. Let us know on Twitter if you enjoyed that one. So Ed, talking of the listeners, shall we take some Twitter questions before we call it a day?
If we must. Any from Duncan?
Oh, Ed, are you sad? People were being super mean.
No.
Okay.
Well, as I said to said person, here lieth my field of and it was empty.
Shrikant_Nima asking whether we think that maybe it was a bit harsh on Luke Shaw to target him in that way. We don't know that it was Luke Shaw directly, do we? I mean, if it was, then I guess it could be considered to be harsh, but I think it's Mourinho, isn't it? You're in the boat or you're out of the boat. All right, here's one for you, Ed. At Borkarabijit says, did Rooney actually have a decent game today?
Asked and answered, I think. Yeah, he was all right.
There we go. Okay. At Gary_1105 says, this is in relation to something you said today, actually, Ed. Does today's win with that lineup further complicate things for Mourinho when trying to find our best 11?
Well, I don't think he knows his best 11, and I'm not really sure he knows exactly how he wants the team to play. And maybe that's understandable. And that was one of the things that seemed to offend a few people this week when I pointed that out. Fair enough, he doesn't understand what his team is or how he wants to play or exactly what he's going to do from week to week, but there's some inconsistency. Gary Neville tweeted before the game, why is anyone surprised about the team lineup? All the players who are not in the team played.
Yeah, Tom can beep that because Gary Neville literally Gary Neville self-beeped on his tweet. I think there's some justification for that. I mean, I wouldn't say everyone that wasn't playing today has played terribly. I think Rashford definitely needed a break. I think Martial, I think, is a bit unlucky. That one worries me a bit. That's one where it feels like my personal prejudices are slightly affecting my judgment because I so desperately want him to do well that I'll be more annoyed if Mourinho ends up alienating Martial than almost anyone else in the squad. Did Rooney play well today? Asks at Andy United because he's fighting for his place and has been dropped, or because there was no pressure on him. I think if you look at the performances he's put in the games where he has been given a chance since he was dropped, the latter seems much more likely.
Sure, yeah. I think it was a kind of game in which late stage Rooney does better.
We're gonna say at Talul, even though we said we wouldn't really talk too much about the Arsenal game, I just love the phrasing of the question. He says, long-time listener, first-time caller, future friend of the Rantcast. Will United miss Zlatan versus Arsenal?
Well, yes, because, no, because he hasn't scored very many goals recently, and no, because he's pretty slow. Yes, because the kind of experience that he has in a big game like this counts for a lot.
Yeah, and if he's going to be hitting form again, then obviously we miss him.
Well, I think a big question will be how United play, right? So if the default option is to put Rooney up front, then Zlatan is a big miss.
Yes.
A big miss. If the default option is to play Rashford or Martial up front, then you could get a very different United side. I mean, especially given, Arsenal centre-backs are playing very well this season, but neither of them are super quick.
No, absolutely. Chris at C Armband, friend of the show, says, can you say some stuff about, this is a great question, Warren Joyce and how he'll do at Wigan? I'm so glad you mentioned that because I've never really been an expert in our youth teams, because there's only so many hours in the day, isn't there, that you can learn about. But the one thing that I do know is that everyone that is an expert in our youth teams thinks that Warren Joyce will be sorely missed, as he's done a very, very, very good job over the years. And of course, the one thing I did want to say is that we here at the Rantcast wish Warren Joyce nothing but massive success in wherever he goes next.
Not is where he's gone, which is unfortunate. We need to wish him success. Wigan's a bit of a mess of a club, so he's not joining a club with tons of resources or really a setup that would take them back into the Premier League. I know they're in the Premier League for a long time, but it's a club that's not in the greatest shape, so he's going to need all his smarts. As for his success at United, two ways of looking at it, really. One is how much did he win with the reserve team, which is a lot, Fergie-esque levels of success. So many times the reserve team, in all its various names, winners or playoff, great success with the reserve team. The other way of looking at the success, how many players came out of that reserve team and into the United first team? And there's a decent amount, and certainly not the class of 92 levels. But Jesse Lingard, Marcus Rashford and a few others have come out of that.
Paul Pogba.
Yeah. Does he count? I suppose so. Of course, yeah. That record that some people thought might go won't go anytime soon because Pogba will be in the team every week. So a decent amount of success, with the conveyor belt and churning out young players to get into the first team. So he's been a great success. And I suppose in a way with a top-class coach, having kept him on United's books for a long time was a great success on the part of the club too. That said, there's been a lot of change at youth levels. They brought in a new sort of elite football development person. He's not a director of football. And they brought out, obviously, Nicky Butters, a new academy head, and a few new coaches and so on. So I think they realised that United's youth setup had become a little bit antiquated compared to some, especially City down the road, and they've been trying to make some changes. So, this will be another key appointment because it's the structure of getting players out of the academy into the reserves, usually out on loan and into the first team.
Yeah, and I think that, it's the two questions in it. How many players have gone on to have a career at United and how many players have gone to have a career in the game? And it feels like...
In the game, loads.
That number
So
is...
United were on the CIES, which is the sort of stats observatory for world football. Puts United second place in Europe. In terms of number of pros churned out of the academy and into Big Five league football.
And it's a more important metric in a way. Obviously, the metric of players making it into the first team is the icing on the cake. It's having an academy that builds footballers is, that's your duty of care to the people coming through the doors, isn't it? And
it's also profitable.
Yeah, well, of course.
You build lots of good footballers and sell them on for money or get clauses for a fee later, it can make quite a bit of money.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. At Ryan Dino7 says, any coincidence that ourselves and Sunderland had good results in a weekend without the managers?
Ouch.
That one hurts. Is it fair to make any judgments on the Swansea game given the starting 11? Asks at the false number 12, Tarek, who writes for the site.
Well, it depends what you believe, right? If you believe, I mean, I don't think it's about the starting 11. I think it's about Swansea and their complete lack of intensity for 45 minutes or lack of belief. Starting 11, it depends what you believe. The Gary Neville assessment, which is the players that came in because the others weren't very good. Or whether, the players came in, made extra special effort, or whether they're all going to be dumped when other players come back anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. At Gadfather says there's still no confirmation from anyone that there is an Ed, and that isn't just me doing Ed's voice too on the Rantcast. Ed is a real... I'm just not that good.
Or the AI. I did send you an article this week saying Adobe are working on what is it being dubbed the Photoshop of audio. So you know how many genius people, some with beards and some not, do magical things with Photoshop and create photos that may or may not be real. Apparently this can be done with audio now, and so it could sample a podcast and just recreate our voices, which would be good. We can just type our response. We just, or in fact, the AI will just make a podcast up having watched the game, and we will no longer be needed.
Yes, I'm terrified of what you're going to do when that exists.
I already told you what I'll be doing, Paul.
At Night Beverage says, why does FIFA hate British servicemen so much? I know. I know this gentleman through Twitter, and I would like to assure you, Ed, that he is not being serious. I don't really want to wade too deep into the Poppy debate. Suffice to say, there is a blanket ban on all military or political symbols being used in international football matches, so I don't understand why this is complicated in any way.
Yeah, true. People say this isn't a military or a political symbol, although it's been very highly politicised by the Prime Minister.
Absolutely. Obviously, if you want to wear a poppy in remembrance of service and sacrifice, then that is... and you want to support the people who've been through the mill for whatever reason of, been in the military and need help. That is a noble thing to do. The kind of collective, it has no value unless it's voluntary. Right, that as a symbol, it means nothing unless people are doing it voluntarily. And the thing with FIFA, it's all very well to say they should make an exception for us, but we only think that because we are us.
Yeah, if Germany were coming to Wembley at the weekend and not Scotland, and decided to wear the what's it called, the Brandelsberg, the eagle, in remembrance of their fallen heroes in World War II, I think we'd get a very different tune. So, which is exactly, and the point I'm making there is the point FIFA are making is when you make a rule and say, nothing of political statements, you take that kind of moral judgment out of it. Which is their point. Yeah. Which doesn't play very well here, of course.
No, absolutely. And please, if you're offended by this, or if you think that this, what me and Ed were saying, is against the poppy as a symbol, well, that's whether or not there's a bigger debate to be had about that. That's not what this is about. This is about FIFA have a really simple rule, and it's simple for a reason. And when you start trying to make exceptions for this because you believe that your symbol is different somehow, like, wow, that's a big problem. Anyway, we'll end on a lighter note with at Halvard Hordvik saying, how happy are you with our top 4 spot in the Europa League table?
Oh, my God. Talking of which, so United's future participation in the Europa League is somewhat in doubt, you might add. Jurgen Klopp had a bit of a dig at United this week. Chris, CA Armband, on Twitter, might enjoy this section. Klopp said, Klopp was asked about whether the lack of European football was helping his team this season. He said, why don't you ask Manchester United in January? Harsh.
Somebody, a Bleacher Report, shared that on their Twitter, and someone was like, oh, that's definitely a George Weah's cousin thing. But no, Klopp really did say that. I don't mind that. It's a bit, silly. He's mucking about. He said it with a grin on his face. When we played them the other week, he said loads of incredibly glowing things about Alex Ferguson, and then said, "Oh, am I allowed to like Alex Ferguson?" So it's just Klopp having fun, isn't it? He'll be laughing on the other side of his glasses when we nick their place in the top 4 come whenever it is, May
2019.
Mourinho's greatest achievement is knocking Klopp off his perch.
Oh, God. They're not going to win the title this year. I don't believe it. It's not going to happen.
Well, someone's going to win the title. I think the idea that they're not one of the teams that could win the title doesn't seem very sustainable as an idea.
I mean, the thought that City and Liverpool might be going for the title on the last day, that's the point where you wish you'd voted Trump and he had his finger over the big red button that said thermonuclear war.
By the time the next podcast is released, we will know whether the polls are right or not. Talking of Liverpool maybe winning the league, my friend Cal Gildart, friend of the show, Cal Gildart, who has done another beautiful art print that's going to be a potential backer reward over on Patreon. The Zlatan one's still available. We're going to do another one as well. He says, pleased to see no one cares, taking advantage of rather not slip up to ensure end of days don't have a clear run at the title. No one cares being Chelsea, rather not's being City, and we know who end of days are, don't we?
Yeah, indeed.
It's good.
Man United's Twitter account, last point before we wrap up. At this point, this week, tweeted out, "We go again." Made famous by Steven Gerrard, of course.
I wonder whether there was a bit of tongue-in-cheek there. I wonder if there was a bit of tongue-in-cheek there. It's interesting to hear Sam talk about the United magazine as it was then being so much more independent as a voice. And he talked about having representatives from the fanzines in the pages of United's official magazine when the Sky bid happened. So it was really very, very different times.
Yeah, that is some time ago, though. It's been called Pravda on the pages of some fanzines for some time, hasn't it? Anyway, enough chat. We've got a whole week next week to talk about Arsenal. I don't know how we're going to do that for an hour, but I'm sure we'll manage to find out. I mean, we've had a terrible game against Fenerbahce and a little bit of a nondescript, at sometimes very good game against Swansea, and managed to fill an hour, or with Sam's interview, an hour and a half of content for all you listeners.
And next week we get to preview Feyenoord as well. An in-depth preview on a meaningless home fixture against Feyenoord.
Yeah, well, it will be the second of 4 home fixtures in a row. Maybe this is the chance for United to get back some confidence. Arsenal, Feyenoord, and 2 against West Ham.
Excellent. Oh, and given that it's international break, shout out to Jesse Lingard and Marcus Rashford for making the England squad again. So that's good. Especially happy for Jesse Lingard, given he's kind of a peripheral figure, I'm sure. Rashford will be in a lot of England squads for a long time to come, but nice to see Lingard getting recognition, because I think he has shown a great deal of promise. Anyway, we'll be back next week, and if you're a Patreon backer, stay tuned, because we're going to do an unspecified period of time on the films of Quentin Tarantino. Otherwise, for the rest of you, we'll see you next week. Patreon listeners, that bit starts now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.